Hello everybody, welcome to a British Audiophile. If you're new to this channel, my name is Taryn. Many people believe that this is the best time ever to get involved in the hi-fi hobby. And if you look at some of the accessible speakers on offer, I can understand why they feel that way. Just take a look at what you have available from the likes of ELAC, Wharfedale and Q Acoustics. So when Acoustic Energy launched a heavily revised version of their entry-level speakers earlier this year, the 100 series, I was very keen to take a look. Now, I've had a bit of a mixed relationship with Acoustic Energy speakers. Their AE1 actives I genuinely think are phenomenal. In fact, if I was to come off the audiophile merry-go-round, sell all my equipment, give up doing this channel, just indulge me for a moment, I'd be quite happy with those speakers fed by an appropriate digital front end. But I've also reviewed some of their passive speakers. In fact, I've reviewed the AE300. That's the passive speaker that the AE1 Active is actually based upon. And it's a fairly decent sounding speaker, but nothing exceptional. I've also reviewed the AE509s. That's a compact floor stander from Acoustic Energy's flagship line with its fancy carbon drivers. To tell you the truth, both those speakers are a little bit dark sounding. They ultimately lose out when it comes to revealing fine details in the upper registers. That's why, whilst I respect the fact that they're a sensible, solid offering within their market segment, they ultimately fail to get my motor running. Today I'm taking a look at the brand new Acoustic Energy AE100, the most affordable speaker that Acoustic Energy produce. So where did I land with this speaker? You may want to hang on to your hats for this one. The Acoustic Energy AE100 Mark IIs are available for £259 in the UK in a satin black, white and walnut vinyl veneer. The elegant cabinet with its curved edges is constructed from 15mm half-inch HDF high density fiberboard. It's a first for a speaker at this price. The previous speaker was constructed from 18mm 0.7-inch MDF. It has allowed Acoustic Energy to maintain the rigidity of the cabinet and increase the internal volume by 30%, whilst the external volume has only increased by 15%. The larger volume and increase in size of the paper cone midwoofer from 110mm 4 1/3 inches to 130mm 5 1/4 inches means that the Mark II produces more bass and has better power handling. The new 25mm 1-inch fabric dome tweeter sits in a revised waveguide from lessons learned during the development of the flagship 500 series. It lives much closer to the midwoofer in order to achieve better integration and more even dispersion between the two drivers. The rear has a slotted port as opposed to a cylindrical one, which should help to reduce port chuffing noises, and pretty standard 5-way speaker binding posts. Those of you who've followed this channel for a while will know that I'm not one for sensationalism. But this speaker, if you get it set up right, and I'll come to that a little bit later, is genuinely superb. It's the clarity, the sound staging ability and the tonality of the AE100s that impresses and really isn't what you'd expect from a speaker around this price. Let's start how I always do with the bass. It's what name enthusiasts would term Pratt, pace, rhythm and timing. I just call it snappy bass. Even around this price, there are speakers with bigger enclosures that will dig deeper and hit harder, delivering those low registers with more visceral impact. But it's the balance here between bass weight and bass definition that I think is very well judged for a compact two-way stand mount. Sure, bass heads out there will want to add subwoofers to give more extension and more dynamics, and this speaker, perhaps more than some of its rivals, will benefit from that. But most speakers, as you probably know, benefit from having subwoofers in two-channel systems anyway. Now let me just stop here for a second. I get asked occasionally to share some of my listening reference tracks. I think that's a reasonable request, but I'm always a little bit reluctant to do that. And the main reason is I think that people read way too much into other people's listening preferences, and it can be a little bit of a distraction. Also, as a reviewer, I'm choosing tracks to highlight certain characteristics, not necessarily listening for pleasure. But regardless, I should share some of my selections a little bit more often. Monty Alexander's Calypso Blues, that comes in 2 parts, is a great upbeat track that highlights the pace, rhythm and timing that I was talking about. It's the clarity of the AE100s with sharp leading edges and nice decays that wouldn't embarrass itself against a speaker at £1,000. Now, before you start jumping up and down and accusing me of hyping this speaker up, I'm not saying it's as good as the best speakers at £1,000. There's speakers out there that certainly have more body and more refinement in the mid-range. But there's something very natural about the vocal region in particular. And dare I say, in this regard, it's reminiscent of my Proact Response 1SCs. Again, I'm not saying it's as good, it just has the essence of that speaker. Come on, you've got to love the underdog. It's the high frequencies where the AE100 gives away its price point. It's not a dark sounding speaker like the AE300 and the AE509 that I reviewed. If anything, the tweeter runs a little bit hot. There's a little bit of hardness in the upper mid-range. It's not annoying, makes the speaker a little bit more engaging and exciting, and the sibilance is emphasized a little bit more than you'd ideally like. This can be corrected to some extent with partnering equipment and correct positioning and setup, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. The soundstage is, I don't know what to tell you, it's mighty impressive. I'm not sure what Acoustic Energy have done. In fact, I've got a few ideas. It might have something to do with moving that tweeter closer to the mid-woofer, using a HDF cabinet, and potentially the lack of boxy resonance that brings, or even the curved edges on the front baffle and the benefits that has with edge diffraction. It's probably a combination of those things. I'd love to see the off-axis measurements and the waterfall plot for this speaker. But the sound field is very wide as any speaker I've heard in my room, and it actually has very good soundstage depth, something that a lot more expensive speakers sometimes struggle with. Within the sound field, the imaging is also very, very good. The AE100s do a wonderful disappearing act. I'm not going to contrive a lot of comparisons. The only appropriately priced speaker I have is the excellent Q Acoustics M20, a powered speaker that can handle analog and digital sources, all for £399. There's no clear winner here. It all comes down to listening preference. The Q Acoustics are a warmer, richer sounding speaker and also a touch more dynamic, thanks to a fuller bass, fuller mid-range and more rolled off highs, but they don't have the clarity and the immense sound feel that the AE100s have. The Sound Artist LS35A isn't really a fair fight, because by the time you've paid for shipping and taxes, I'm sure you're looking at the best part of £800 here in the UK, but I can only compare with what I've got. Actually, it's quite interesting to observe what you get for your extra money, and what you get is a fuller, richer mid-range with more textures revealed and better instrument separation, more refinement in the mid-range, certainly a lot more refinement on top. Dynamically, they're similar, although I'd give the edge to the AE100s. They're a slightly bigger speaker, they sound slightly bigger, as well as the soundstage width I think is a little bit wider on the AE100s as well. In for a penny, in for a pound, let's throw it in against my current reference speaker for around £1,000, the excellent Amphion Argon 1s. That's a much more dynamic speaker, but with a similar sense of scale. Just goes to show how good these AE100s are when it comes to sound staging. Tonally, the Amphions are a touch leaner, a touch cooler in the mid-range, but in every other regard they trump the Acoustic Energies hands down, and they should do at 4 times the price. They have better detail, more refinement, better instrument separation, and they can handle complex pieces of music much more easily. The Acoustic Energy AE100s play really well at low volumes and at moderate volumes, up to about 85 dB. Once you get above that, they do get a little bit shouty. Now this is to be expected, limited SPL levels from a speaker around this price. You're not going to get the same motor structure that you're going to get from a speaker around £1,000. They have to save money somewhere. They also play really well in the near field. It helps to have the 2 drivers so close together to get better integration, and that's what's going on there. You do have to tease the performance out of this speaker with positioning, but once you get it set up right, they throw out a very even sound feel across the room, and that suggests that they've got very good off-axis performance. So let me share with you where I wound up with these speakers in my room. Now I should say that your mileage is likely to vary. You have a different room and a different setup, but I still think it will serve as a useful guide. I wound up with the speakers a little bit closer to the wall behind them than I'd ordinarily have even a 2-way bookshelf speaker. That's because the AE100s benefited from a little bit of extra boundary reinforcement to support the bass. I normally advocate having the speakers well away from the wall to ensure that the earlier reflections are delayed by 5 milliseconds at least, but there's always a balancing act for these things. If you're interested in knowing where I wound up exactly, I always measure from the front of the speaker to the wall behind it. That distance was 80 centimeters. Tone is also really important with these speakers because it serves as a treble adjustment. As I mentioned earlier in the review, the tweeter does run a little bit on the lively side. I wound up with very minimal toe-in, just a few degrees from them pointing straight out. That way I was able to calm down the tweeter a little bit by listening a little bit more off axis, maintain a wide soundstage without compromising a solid central image. As far as partner equipment is concerned, I'd stick with amplifiers that are either neutral or on the warm side of neutral just to be safe, but I don't think the AE100s are particularly fussy about the amplifiers that you use. At least that was my experience from what I tried. First up was the SML SA300, an amplifier the size of a pencil case for around £130, based on German company Infineon's Class D amplifier chip. That's a cracking little amplifier for the money. It even has a digital USB connection. I need to post a review on it at some point. I'm sure I'll get to it eventually. So for around £400, you have a system that's comparable in price and performance to the Q Acoustic M20s. They have a different presentation. This one's more detail-centric, whereas the M20s are warmer and richer. Next up was the IOTA VX SA3, 50 watts of Class AB power for £399. I thought the IOTA VX SA3 might be a bit too lean for the AE100. Not a bit of it. It actually gave a fuller mid-range presentation and a wider soundstage. The Arcam SA10 has just arrived, but I couldn't resist hooking it up. Another 50 watt per channel Class AB amp, now costing £735. Overkill? Not necessarily. I'm not saying that the AE100s get the best out of the SA10. To tell you the truth, I can't talk about it too much. I just had a quick listening session. But I did feel that I noticed an improvement again in terms of body in the mid-range and overall refinement. I'll find out more when I spend a bit more time with it. The Acoustic Energy AE100s are an attractive speaker with a high level of spouse acceptance factor, but it's the sound quality that's the showstopper here. It's the clarity, the natural tonality and the immense sound feel that really punch above their weight. Acoustic Energy have got their priorities exactly right. Produce the best sounding speaker that you possibly can without chasing high SPL levels and trying to shove as much bass into a box as you possibly can. Surely this is an example of why there's never been a better time to be in hi-fi than this. The Acoustic Energy AE100s get an outstanding from this channel. My question for today is, if you were designing a speaker, what would it be like? You don't have to get overly technical, you can if you wish, but if you just simply want to talk about what it'll look like or what it'll sound like, that's fine as well. There's no room for elitism and hi-fi snobbery on this channel. I simply won't put up with it. I'd love to hear about your thoughts in the comments section below. All that remains for me to say is, if you like this video, if you like what I'm doing with this channel, you want to see it grow, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification if you haven't already. Check me out on Patreon for consultancy services, bonus content, and the video chats that we have from time to time. But for today, for now, a British audiophile, signing off.